you want an FPS boost along with better visibility overall and better colors, then this is the video for you, because today I'm going to be covering the best Fortnite Chapter 3 Season 2 settings on PC. Along with graphics, I'm also going to show you guys how to set up your settings correctly for the new sprint mechanic that's been added into this season. By default, the settings for this new movement mechanic aren't great, or it doesn't work at all, so I'm going to cover it in this video. So in the menu of the game, you need to make sure you're not actually in a game when doing this. Come to the settings area, and we're going to start off with video and graphics settings. The first thing you need to do before we jump into any of these is, well, you'll notice likely you've got a load more settings here than I do, and that is because you need to put your rendering mode on performance beta. That's the far right option of performance rather than DirectX 11 or DirectX 12. This gives you the better FPS overall. A lot of people think that this is just for like laptop users, but honestly, anyone trying to play Fortnite and get the best performance should be using this performance mode. It runs very, very stably. It looks great. So do that, and then you'll have to restart Fortnite. When you come back on, you'll be presented with far less graphics settings to actually play around with, but we can still dial these in and get some good performance out of the game. So now that you're back on the game and you've got less settings showing here, come up to the top and go to window mode, and we set it to full screen. What this means is that the game is being exclusively rendered in rather than rendering in over something like your desktop or something happening in the background. Now, I'm not expecting that you guys are going to be running any other applications in the background while you're playing, but having the game on full screen, or exclusive full screen as it would usually be called, means that there's no resources being diverted elsewhere. It's all going into Fortnite, which is very important. Resolution, put this to your native resolution unless you're trying to run a stretched resolution. That's up to you guys. I'm not going to be covering that in this video, but in general, I wouldn't bother trying to lower your resolution here. If you have real problems, we can turn down the 3D resolution, which I'll cover in just a sec. Frame rate, I would just set this to unlimited. If you start to have any weird instability issues with your FPS, like you sometimes have really high, you sometimes have really low, then you can come in here and you can set this to a number which you can hit consistently. So if you are, for example, sometimes hitting 200 FPS, but actually most of the time it's flickering between like 200 and 185, then just put it at a max of 180, because then you will always be hitting a stable frame rate, which in general give you more consistent input lag. So very important step here. But if you've got a strong PC, shove it on unlimited until you have any problems. Graphics, I will come back to this in just a second when we talk about colors, but let's carry on to graphics quality. 3D resolution, as I mentioned earlier, I don't like to touch the resolution, but if you do have real problems running this game on a laptop or on a really old system, then you can come and drop this down to something like 80%. It will make the game a little bit more blurry, but it's a very, very simple way of just gaining performance across the board, which it might be something you have to do. But for general people who are, running the game decently, keep this on 100 to keep the maximum sharpness in your image. View distance, I keep this on far. I don't see the advantage of having on epic, but I do find that on far, I'm able to get still decent performance without missing out on certain things at range, which I want to see, certain buildings, certain trees, how they look at distance. So I'd recommend keeping on far if you can. Textures is going to come down completely to your GPU. So if you have a decent GPU, or even like a mid-end GPU, you should have no problem running the game at medium textures. There's very few times when going to low textures is actually going to net you much performance, because it's all down to how much VRAM you have in your computer. For me, running a 3070, I like my game to still look sharp. I actually find the game has better visibility when I have the textures higher, because I get more detailed textures and more detailed buildings. I find it easier to actually tell enemies against their background, so I put this on high. Auto download high resolution textures as well as high resolution texture reminders. Keep these both off. This is a newer setting to the game, but we do not want to download this. It basically means that you're downloading high resolution textures while the game's running. It's bound to cause problems, and it should only be used if you're trying to max out the game's graphical fidelity, which no one's really trying to do in Fortnite. We're all trying to play competitively and at least, just try and get some wins. So it's not really going to help with that. So we keep this off. Meshes. This is a weird one because turning this to low does net you really good performance, but it makes a lot of the objects in the game look terrible. Trees, Builds, although we don't have builds in the game currently as I'm making this because it's Chapter 3 Season 2, all building's gone, but having this on low really just makes everything look like marshmallows. It makes everything look completely fake, so I would recommend that you keep this on high unless you're having problems. I would potentially say meshes is the last thing you should turn to low if you've tried everything else and you're having problems. But yeah, high meshes is really important. Now let's come back up to the graphics section, and this is how we're going to get some really good visibility, brightness, and color into the game. First thing is going to be turn the colorblind mode to tritanope. A lot of people, when they first start the game, will have this on off, but by turning it to tritanope, you already get a decent amount of extra brightness into the game. This, by the way, this doesn't matter if you're actually colorblind or not. Just do this because it changes the colors of the game overall. Colorblind strength, we're going to turn this to 10. This just basically enhances how much that colorblind mode is actually activating on the game. So by turning this to 10, you are fully activating tritanope as a color filter of your game. And then the final thing, which is a weird one, which not many people will think to do, is actually turn your brightness to 150%. Now, you will do this and you'll think, my game looks really bright in the menu. I think it's going to look really washed out. But when you actually get in game, you get such a nice brightness across the game while still maintaining some really nice contrast. So colors don't look completely blown out. Lighting doesn't look completely blown out and washed out. It actually looks really clear, and you can spot enemies so much easier by having this graphical setup. And now finally, I want to cover the new sprint mechanic in the game, because this was not working that well for me when I first started. I couldn't really understand what was going on. Obviously, we used to have the, I guess, sprinting being basically what we'd now consider to be running, where if you were to hold shift, then you would run, and if you let go of shift, then you'd walk. It seems like basically running is like the normal thing now. There is no walking really in Fortnite. You're either running or you're sprinting, which is the new option. So what I would do is come into your keyboard controls, or if you're on a controller, this is gonna be very different, but for keyboard players, you want to put sprint on left shift, because that's the standard sprint button for any PC game. I mean, if you want to put it on something different, go ahead, but make sure it's at least bound, because for me, it wasn't even bound when I started the game. Then after doing that, come to the game settings area, and in the movement section, put toggle sprint to off. We do not want sprint to be a toggle. By having it on toggle, it would mean basically press shift to start sprinting, and then if we want to stop sprinting, you either have to run out of stamina or you have to press shift again. We don't want that. We want this to off so that we sprint by holding shift, and then when we let go of shift, it stops us sprinting. That's how it generally works in most other games, and it's what more people will be used to. If you don't do this, you'll find yourself sprinting for long durations that you don't want to. You get far more control out of having toggle sprint to off. So anyway, guys, that is all the settings for this video. If you dial these in, you'll be having far better performance across the game in no time. Boosts in FPS, better visibility, better colors, all great stuff. If you are looking for a new game to play alongside Fortnite, so you're playing your Fortnite and you want to play something else, well, there's a game called The Cycle Frontier that I did a video on just over here. And I guess in the same way that PUBG got overtaken by Fortnite, there's a potential that The Cycle could overtake Escape from Tarkov in that genre. So yeah, go check that one out. It's a really awesome game and I really enjoy it. Anyway, guys, thanks very much for watching. Bye-bye.